What's poppin', famo swine, and welcome back to the 3-Star Lounge. Today, I want to talk about video game awards. Because earlier this month, the Game Awards show took place, and to the surprise of no one who was paying attention, Baldur's Gate 3 won Game of the Year. And some detractors of other nominated games like Spider-Man 2 are using that as fuel for their Spider-Man 2 wasn't that good thoughts. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to say once again, I don't really give a shit if you like the game or not, because at the end of the day, I can only enjoy the game for one person, and that's me, and I enjoyed it. But what I am going to have to point out is that using its lack of winning at the Game Awards show as a reason to say the game was not good is just a very unserious stance to take. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand why I say that. So to get started, I'm just going to quickly list off all of the Game of the Year award winners since they started running this show back in 2014. All right, buckle in, here we go. Dragon Age Inquisition, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Overwatch, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, God of War, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, Last of Us Part 2, It Takes Two, Elden Ring, and finally, Baldur's Gate 3. Now, there are a couple of things of note about this list of winners here, but the first that should be the most obvious is that exactly 0 of these games are superhero games. And that is because, generally speaking, superhero games don't really win these kinds of awards. Even the best games in this genre tend to not walk away with Game of the Year nods. Let's look back at the gold standard of the superhero game genre, the Arkham franchise. The Arkham series, when you look at that trilogy, the award-winning history of that series is mostly centered around best action game wins, best vocal performance wins, comic book adaptation wins, leaps in lighting and graphics, things along those lines. But there are very few best game nominations and wins. Those are far in between and are from smaller publications and shows, events that don't even happen anymore. So these aren't even awards that can even be given out to modern superhero games that follow in the footsteps of those previous Arkham games. And even within themselves, if you look at the award history, you can see them just trickling away as publications and events stop happening and these kinds of video game award programs are being consolidated into really just one thing. But if we really just stick with the Game Awards show, just like the recent one, the big one that everyone talks about, if we just stick with that, the one that started in 2014. In 2015, Batman Arkham Knight, which is for my money one of the best superhero games ever made. I know I'm a little biased because Batman's my favorite superhero and that's one of my favorite games of all time. But it didn't even get nominated for Game of the Year. Not even a nomination. But if you look here, Fallout 4 did. Now, I like Fallout 4 as well. I have tons of hours in Fallout 4. But even amongst the people that enjoy Fallout 4, it's not looked at the same as previous Bethesda single-player experiences. Up until the release of Starfield and people sitting down and getting their hands on it, Fallout 4 was the black sheep amongst Bethesda single-player experiences. And yet, it still got nominated for Game of the Year over Batman Arkham Knight, which is one of the best games in its niche. And there's a little bit something to that, because if you look at the winners of the Game of the Year award, most all of them are either RPGs or games that include RPG elements within their gameplay. The exception are games that were just extreme huge hits, like such massive hits that they took over the entire gaming cycle for the year. That would be Overwatch, or a sequel to one of the best and biggest games ever made, Last of Us Part 2. Or It Takes Two, what was going on at the time during the pandemic, it was just the perfect game for the perfect time. Because when you're trapped at home, if you're trapped at home with your partner, even if they don't really play video games, that was the type of game that could get them into it and you could just share a special moment. So outside of those 3 games, Every single one of them is either an RPG or a game that includes more RPG elements within their gameplay than they had before. And that opens up those games to a little bit more player choice and agency than a particular superhero game would. Most superhero games, the only way you can add in your own player style is in terms of how you actively attack each situation, in terms of what moves you use and this, that, and the third, and what suits you wear. And that's totally fine. Whereas with an RPG, you have different builds you can make, different play styles, and this, that, and the other, which allows you to play the game again in an entirely different way. And it allows for different challenges where you can stretch the life you can get out of that game much, much further, which is a boon that superhero games don't necessarily get. And that's not a knock on them. They're doing their own thing, and everything they're doing is fantastic in its own way. It's just not something that will win Game of the Year. Because when I think of a game of the year, I'm thinking of a game that one could play all year long. If you're a person that doesn't get to play a lot of games, or only has a handful of games, or doesn't have a lot of time to dedicate to playing video games, and you only have 1 or 2 games throughout the entirety of a year that you'll play at a relatively slow pace, or maybe even just play it a couple times throughout the year, a game with RPG elements or a outright RPG will go a lot further than even the very best superhero game. Whichever your favorite modern superhero game is, I promise you the mileage on that is far less than even the most middling RPG you've ever played. Because even the most middling RPG should have at least 3 playthroughs in it. 3. Some kind of melee build, range build, stealth build. 3 playthroughs at least in a middling RPG. Whereas in a superhero game, you're going to play it once, maybe twice with a New Game Plus, and a third time if you want to play it again with the DLC. And as I've said before, that is truly just the nature of the beast. It is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's just what you signed up for when you're dealing with a superhero game. It's like showing up to a pool and complaining that there's water in it. There's only gonna be so much game in a superhero game. Everyone should know this by now. But hey, now we can get to the most fun part of today's video. So, generally speaking, the people I've seen with the take that Spider-Man 2 not winning anything at the Game Awards is proof that the game wasn't good and is a fall from grace for the Marvel Spider-Man series, I have to remind them of something. So, Marvel Spider-Man, the first game in the Marvel Spider-Man trilogy, the one that the detractors of Spider-Man 2 will often point to and say, see, that's the good game. That's the perfect game. It doesn't have any woke bullshit in it. It doesn't have any hair popping through the suit. Why didn't they make that again? I bet they would have won had they made that again. Well, here's the dealio, friends. Back in 2018, when that game came out, it was nominated for a bunch of awards at the Game Awards as well. And it also got washed. So, what are we talking about? Like, really, what are we talking about? Marvel Spider-Man 1 walked away with the same amount of awards as it did the second time around. It got washed by God of War and a bunch of other stuff. So what are we talking about? And that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Both of these games are fantastic in their own way. But as much as people were excited to play Spider-Man back in 2018, there was no version of that was gonna outdo God of War. This was God of War, one of PlayStation's mascot, coming back after years of being away. And I know you could say Spider-Man is the same thing, but Spider-Man is a comic book guy. His video games is like, yeah, it's a video game about the comic book guy. Kratos is a video game guy. That is one of our dudes. So when he's coming back, that is going to be a bigger deal amongst gamers than even the best superhero game. In fact, let's just go back to just a year ago, Elden Ring. When that game came out, that was the most anticipated game of the year by far. Just the week before release, Horizon 2 came out, a game that is also very good. It is a very good game. I'll fight you on that. No one knew about it. It got completely overshadowed by Elden Ring to the point where people were saying that the game had to be bad because it wasn't getting any buzz. But that's really not the case. It was more so the case of being outshone by a much bigger star. It was fireworks in the daytime. Like, it was a fireworks in the daytime situation. So that's just how it is with these kinds of things. If you have a game with that much hype coming out and it actually delivers on it, there's nothing you could do about it to outshine it that year. That was gonna win Game of the Year. Much like Baldur's Gate 3 is a RPG that delivers on all the hype. Larian Studios, I knew for the moment they said they were making that game was going to be heat because their RPG games are extremely detailed. But now we're bringing Baldur's Gate into it, a franchise known amongst video game fans. It is a classic video game franchise amongst gamers. No, big things were expected out of that game, and it delivered on every aspect. So it was no shock to me, or no shock to anyone that was paying attention, that it won Game of the Year. And honestly, it should have, because if a superhero game were to win Game of the Year, I would be shocked. And it is for those very people that don't get a lot of games during a year. And I feel like there may be a disconnect when it comes to thinking about those people, because as gaming has gotten bigger and exploded in popularity, those people are becoming further and further between, because with more games being free to play and all of this, there are more options available for even gamers that don't have a lot of money to spend on new games. But ones that have that time deficit, ones that don't really have a lot of time to dedicate to a game that you can buy once and that'll be your game for the year, when you can buy one game and play it over the course of the year because you don't have a lot of time to dedicate to it, or you can even play it multiple times over the course of the year and get two completely different experiences out of it. That game will always be of higher value for your $70 of even the best superhero game, which I'm not saying that to say that superhero games are overpriced, because let's be honest with ourselves, we are spending $70 to get audiovisual entertainment for over 24 hours, 30 plus hours. That is an entire day, an entire 24-hour cycle, an entire rotation, my G's, where you can be entertained for one price of $70. And there are not many entertainment experiences, where you can get that kind of return for that kind of price. So if we're just being completely honest with ourselves, the game that can do that but twice more is of much greater value to the player than the game that you're only gonna play once. Besides, as much as we enjoy these award shows and it's nice to see developers of great games be recognized for their hard work, we are aware that these don't really matter, right? You can enjoy the goddamn game whether it's won an award or not. That's okay. Even if the game is viewed as trash, it's okay to like garbage. Just be real with yourself. You just gotta acknowledge that it's trash. But seriously, it's okay for a game to not win an award. Doesn't make it any less fun. Quick question for anyone brave enough to comment below. Since 2014, what is your favorite video game? And did it win Game of the Year that year? I'm curious to see. Anyway, this has been the 3-Star Lounge. If you would like to check out anything else I'm doing, you can check out my podcast, The Potluck, where you get what you get, where me and my friends shoot the shit about movies, video games, music, and all that other great jazz. And if you had a good time, leave a tip in the form of a like to let the algorithm know that you like that shit, and or sub upward and hit the bell so you know when I wake up from the next Kush coma to bring you something new. This has been a 3-Star Lounge, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye now.
todos aquí esta noche. Esta noche todos aquí coge a alguien. Ahora bebemos, fumamos, bailamos.